Every night, long after the world quiets down, there is a sacred space, an invisible threshold between the day you just lived and the life you are still building. While others fall asleep aimlessly, some use this time like the ancient Stoics did, as a final sharpening of the sword before battle. Because the Stoics understood something that modern society forgets: your night shapes your mind, your discipline, and ultimately your destiny. What you do before sleep is not just ritual. It's reflection, refinement, and sometimes even revolution. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his journal by lamplight, not because he had the luxury of time, but because he couldn't afford not to. He knew that if he failed to master himself in the quiet, he would crumble in the chaos. So before surrendering to sleep, he turned inward, dissecting his thoughts, actions, and intentions with surgical precision. It wasn't for performance. It was for preparation. So tonight, as the noise dies down, the world won't tell you to do this. But I will. There are 7 habits, disciplines, really, that Stoic thinkers use to rewire their minds, conquer emotional chaos, and face every sunrise as warriors of peace. You don't need incense. You don't need perfection. All you need is presence. The first is reflection. Not vague nostalgia, but surgical introspection. What did you do today? Not what happened to you, but how you responded. Did you let your anger speak for you? Did you chase comfort instead of purpose? The Stoics believed that an unexamined day is a wasted one. Seneca would replay the entire day in his mind before sleep, like reviewing a battle, not to dwell, but to train. Because tomorrow will test you. And the only way to meet it as a master is to learn from the mistakes of today. This isn't about guilt. It's about ownership. Without reflection, you are merely repeating your reactions, not learning from them. Then comes detachment. The night is the Stoics' reminder that nothing is permanent. Not praise, not pain, not possession. You must mentally release the events of the day like a warrior dropping his armor. Did someone insult you? Let it go. Did you win a victory? Let it fade. Because if your identity is tied to external events, you are already a prisoner. Detachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." Your power lies in knowing the difference. Before sleep, whisper this truth: I own nothing. I control nothing. I choose how I respond. The third is gratitude, but not the shallow kind forced by self-help slogans. This is about recognizing that life owes you nothing, and yet you are breathing. The Stoic gives thanks not for luxury, but for resilience, for the chance to be tested, for the cold that sharpens his discipline, for the hunger that teaches him control. He is thankful not because things are easy, but because he is becoming stronger. Even the hardship is a gift, especially the hardship. Next is preparation for impermanence. Most people go to sleep assuming tomorrow is guaranteed. The Stoic doesn't. He understands that death is not a distant threat, it is a daily possibility. So he closes his eyes without arrogance. He does not live in fear, but in urgency. Before sleep, he reminds himself, I may not wake, and that is why I must live today with purpose. This reflection doesn't darken the soul. It lights it on fire. Every night becomes a chance to die fulfilled, not full of regrets. Then, discipline. The modern mind is at war with itself, scrolling, indulging, fleeing silence. The Stoic does the opposite. He creates structure even in the dark. He sets limits. He decides when the day ends, not his distractions. He is not controlled by impulses. He observes them and lets them pass. He makes sleep an act of strength, not surrender. Because discipline is not just about doing what's hard, it's about refusing what weakens you. Also vital is forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself. The Stoic is not a perfectionist. He is a realist. He knows he will fall short. But what matters is that he gets up sharper, stronger, kinder. He forgives not because he's weak, but because guilt wastes energy he could use to build. So he whispers, "Today I fell short, but tomorrow I rise." And finally, visualization. Not of dreams and fantasies, but of what he must become. He doesn't wish for ease. He imagines trials, and prepares to meet them with character. The Stoic visualizes poverty, betrayal, illness, not to attract them, but to become unshakable in their presence. He pictures himself calm in the storm, still in chaos, firm when the world shakes. This is the art of premeditatio malorum. It is not pessimism. It is preparation. Now imagine doing this every night, not once, not occasionally, but consistently. Imagine carving out a mental fortress while the world sleeps. Imagine becoming so aware of your flaws, so anchored in your values, so unattached to outcomes, that no event could break you. This is the path of the Stoic. It is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is not for everyone. But if you do these things, truly do them, you will start to feel something unfamiliar to most people. Peace. Not the peace that comes from everything going your way, but the peace that remains even when nothing does. And in that silence, just before you drift into sleep, you'll feel it, that flicker of strength, of clarity, of self-mastery. You'll know that the day did not control you. You shaped it. You studied it. You overcame it. And tomorrow, when the sun rises again, you won't just wake up. You'll rise, not as the person you were yesterday, but as someone refined by thought, steeled by discipline, and sharpened by silence. Most people think transformation happens in the daylight, through grand gestures or loud declarations. But the Stoic knows better. Real transformation is forged in private, when no one is watching, when the applause fades and the spotlight vanishes. It is forged in the choices you make when you could be careless, when you could let your guard down, when you could say, "It's just one night." But you didn't, because you know the cost of neglect. You know what happens when you go to bed angry, unaware, ungrateful. You know that every unchecked emotion is a leak in your discipline. Every ignored flaw is a crack in your armor. So you sit in the quiet, facing yourself, not to punish, but to prepare. The Stoics didn't preach this for praise. They lived it to survive. Their world was not gentle. Neither is yours. The battles you face may not come with swords and shields, but they come with chaos, loss, betrayal, temptation, and fear. The world won't announce when it plans to test you. It just will. And when it does, your only defense will be how well you've trained your mind the night before. That's the quiet brilliance of the Stoic life. It turns sleep from an escape into a forge. You're not just resting. You're readying. When others numb themselves with noise, you use stillness as strategy. When others drift into dreams, you sink into discipline. You become the architect of your own resilience. And this resilience, it compounds. One night of Stoic practice might not feel like much. But 30 nights? 100? A year of reflection, detachment, gratitude, preparation, discipline, forgiveness, and visualization? That doesn't just change your evenings. It alters your identity. The way you walk. The way you respond. The way you lead. Suddenly, you're not chasing peace. You are peace. You're not waiting for strength. You embody it. The opinions of others lose their grip. Temporary highs lose their lure. You begin to live above circumstance, not beneath it. Because the chaos of the world will never stop. But your reaction to it, that becomes your kingdom. Your calm becomes louder than their noise. Your clarity, sharper than their confusion. And your steadiness, your unshakable presence, that becomes the quiet power that others can't explain, but deeply feel. There's something undeniably powerful about a person who has nothing to prove, because they've already confronted themselves. Night after night. thought after thought, choice after choice. They are no longer ruled by fear, nor enslaved by pleasure. They have seen their weakness and walked through it. And in doing so, they found a strength that no storm can steal. You may not be perfect. You may still fall. But fall as someone who is aware. Rise as someone who has trained for this. There's no ceremony. No applause. Just you, your thoughts, and the decision to face them. That is the true test. That is where legends are built, not in battlefields, but in bedrooms, when the lights go off and the war with the self begins. So tonight, choose differently. Sit with your mind. Examine your day. Own your actions. Forgive yourself. Let go of what you cannot control. Give thanks even for the wait. Prepare for the unpredictable. And visualize the kind of person you refuse to die without becoming. Because the truth is, most people die long before their bodies do, killed by distraction, by regret, by unresolved emotion. But you are different. You are awake. And each night before you sleep, you remind yourself that this life is short, but your strength, your clarity, your character, that is eternal. And so, without needing applause or validation, you lay your head down, not just to sleep, but to rise. And when you rise, it isn't with a jolt of panic or a haze of regret. It's with quiet intention. While the rest of the world wakes up chasing something, more money, more noise, more escape, you rise anchored in what truly matters. You carry forward the lessons you earned in the dark. They move with you like armor no one sees, but everyone feels. Your speech becomes more deliberate. Your anger, slower to rise. Your decisions, less frantic, more principled. Because you've rehearsed the hard moments. You've practiced calm. You've stared down discomfort in silence and learned to breathe through it. It's in these small moments, barely visible to others, that your power begins to compound. You no longer react out of habit. You respond out of awareness. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable and instead begin mastering what is yours. Your reason, your choices, your focus, your energy. You don't get pulled into every argument, every temptation, every storm. You observe it. You let it pass. You stay centered. There's a quiet nobility in the way a Stoic carries themselves through an unstable world. People will notice, but they won't always understand. They'll call it calm. They'll call it confidence. They may even call it cold. But it's none of those things. It's just clarity. The clarity of someone who no longer negotiates with noise. And yet, none of this makes you distant. In fact, the more you master your nights, the more you show up with presence during the day. You listen better. You love deeper. Because your cup is no longer leaking from unconscious wounds. You're no longer trying to prove something to the world. You are simply becoming something, with purpose, with precision, and with peace. The Stoic life isn't about isolation. It's about elevation. Elevating your thinking above the emotional storms. Elevating your habits above your excuses. Elevating your values above your impulses. And night by night, choice by choice, you rise, not above others, but above your former self. What once triggered you no longer has teeth. What once distracted you now feels shallow. What once terrified you now looks like a test. And slowly, your identity starts to shift. You become known not for what you chase, but for what you withstand. Not for what you say, but for how you show up. People may not always understand your discipline, your detachment, your calm in chaos, but they will respect it. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to respect yourself. Not in an inflated, performative way, but in the deep, grounded way that comes from knowing you're keeping the promises no one else sees. You've made your inner world your priority. And now, your outer world reflects that. This is the long game. The invisible path. The one most people skip because there's no instant reward, no public recognition, no viral moment. But for those few who walk it, the difference is undeniable. They don't need loud victories. Their power is in their peace. Their success is in their steadiness. Their reward is in their resilience. So when the world comes crashing, when life twists in directions you didn't ask for, when people betray you, when losses pile up, you don't collapse. You remember who you are. Because you built yourself, layer by layer, night after night. In silence. In truth. In stillness. And that is something no one can take. ChatGPT said. And that is something no one can take. Not the world, not time, not even fate. Because what's built in stillness is forged in the deepest part of you, beneath your name, beneath your status, beneath your ever-changing moods. It becomes part of your essence. And that kind of strength doesn't rust. It doesn't flinch. It endures. Even when you're misunderstood. Especially when you're misunderstood. Because the Stoic doesn't walk this path for applause. He walks it because the alternative is weakness. And weakness is not just pain, it's betrayal. Betrayal of potential. Betrayal of purpose. Betrayal of the rare chance to become something truly unshakable in a world that constantly shakes. And you begin to notice things that others miss. A hesitation before a lie. A trigger before a reaction. A flicker of ego trying to hijack the moment. But you don't follow it. You watch it. You name it. You let it pass. Where others spiral, you step back. Where others rush in with noise, you wait with awareness. And that gap between impulse and action, that tiny space that most never master, becomes your kingdom. That's where power lives. That's where freedom breathes. Not in control over others, but in command over yourself. That's why each night matters. That's why the seemingly small rituals before sleep are not small at all. Because they decide who you become when you wake. They decide how you handle suffering. How you navigate success. How you treat people who have nothing to offer you. How you respond when no one is watching. You start to realize everything is training. Every conversation is a mirror. Every hardship is a weight. Every moment, an invitation to go deeper, to be sharper, to live more deliberately. You're not performing for the world. You're preparing for it. And when something goes wrong, and it will, you don't ask, "Why me?" You ask, "What now?" You don't panic. You return to the training. You don't collapse. You adjust. Because you've rehearsed this. Maybe not this exact scenario, but the principle is the same. Meet life on your feet, not on your knees. Meet chaos with clarity. Meet pain with purpose.